This podcast is brought to you by Amusement Warehouse Magazine, the industry's largest trade publication. We cover amusement parks, carnivals, fairs, festivals, history, safety columns. We really got it all when it comes to the amusement business. Only remaining print publication in the amusement industry on a regular basis. So if you're interested in what the amusement industry has to offer, subscribe today. You can subscribe by logging on to amusementwarehouse.com, carnivalwarehouse.com, or amusementparkwarehouse.com. Welcome to another edition of the Amusement Warehouse Podcast. Today we have with us Reverend Mr. Paul Muller, Deacon and chaplain for the amusement industry, and also a longtime participant in the amusement industry in various businesses. So he's got a couple of different tracks, tentacles that are pulling him into the amusement industry here all over the place. So he's got a fascinating background, and we're looking forward to speaking to him. Paul, thanks so much for coming on.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
So let's start with how you got involved. How'd you get involved in this crazy business?
Oh, 33 or so years ago, I met a gentleman, Larry Nicotra, who used to be the president of Southern Leasing. You remember Larry?
Yeah.
And our wives did things together in school PTA. I didn't know Larry, but we went over and had dinner one night at his place, and they wandered off. And Larry and I just visited, and then we met a couple more times, and then he asked if I wanted to join Southern Leasing back then as the sales manager. I said, I didn't know anything about finance, and he said, that's okay. I can teach you that. I was sales manager for a number of companies, and he said, I need somebody who will handle people and both customers and the salesmen who are driving me nuts. Joe Arnone, you know him. And so it's a case, I went to work for Larry when it was in the Southern Leasing days, and that exposed me to the industry. We were doing things other than amusement, but amusement was a dominant part of our portfolio.
Interesting.
But we were sold ultimately when we were owned by the Kansas City Southern Industries, Kansas City Southern Railroad. Odd that we would be part of that. But the connection there was generators. The generator salesman had, years before, back in the 80s, approached Southern Leasing, they were a captive at that point, and said, would you finance generators for carnivals? Larry said, I don't know anything about carnivals, but if we had to take one back, we'll put it on the railroad. So he tried it, and then ultimately got to know customers. They said, would you do rides? Would you do food trailers? Would you do trucks? Which we were doing trucks anyway. So we did that. By the time I got there in 93, they were the dominant lender in the industry. And yeah, and there were a lot of lenders back then.
Yeah. Would you you would mostly do the portable business, or was there also parks and FECs?
We did some parks, very few, because as silly as it may sound, it won't to you or any of the carnival people. The banks would sit in their high buildings and look out, and they might see worlds of fun and say, oh, look at those rides, and good corporate citizen. And they would lend them money at ridiculous rates. And then we go talk to them. Well, we'd like to do the portable. Well, I don't know. It moves around. It goes out of the big word was footprint. It's not in our footprint.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, think about it. It's great. I have a lot of friends. I mean, I didn't grow up in the industry like you. I went to school and have an MBA. I was talking to some of my friends that were in banking, and I was just laughing. I was like, if I want to buy a ride, and I go in and fill out your application, like, where is this stored? Well, I move it all over the place. It's like a nightmare. It's like the worst answer you can possibly get. Like, well, where would you find it if we were to look for it?
Ron, it's really the best answer. And I had that same question when I meet with banks when I was trying to get money. And I'd say, hey, I said, it moves, Oh, no. I said, that's great. Why is that great? Well, if I had to get it, I can bring it back. It has wheels. You got to take jackhammers to get it out of the cement. Who's the smart? I should have probably not said, who's the smart one? Usually they said I could leave after that.
But really, at a building or whatever, you got to, how do you get it? Or what do they call those things? The improvements you make to the building,
sure.
How do you take them out? You can't. I mean, whereas
you can't.
A ride, you just hook up to it and grab it and ride it back or drive it back.
I did remember one bank one of my customers told me this story, and it was true. It was a large bank nationwide, and they had been, I don't want to say pestering, but the young man, I want to do something. Finally said, Paul, I got to get this guy off my back. I said, fine. It's nothing personal. No problem. And the guy looked at the portfolio and said, okay, I'll do the bunkhouses.
What?
And I said, what? Yeah, he said, he wanted to do bunkhouses or trucks. And of course, there were a lot of used trucks. Didn't want to touch the rides, but he was willing to go 5 years on bunkhouses and used trucks. And so he said, be my guest, go for it.
Trucks, I could see. I'm not so sure about the bunkhouses. That's a little.
He viewed them as being something like they had to have, which is like true. But not knowing the industry, there, that's a problem. We were fortunate in that when my son got out of college with his degree in finance, he went to St. Louis University. One of the professors there was a gentleman who also owned a couple of banks, a brokerage firm in St. Louis, a wealth management company, he and his other partner. And they got to know my son through my daughter-in-law, who they had an entrepreneurship degree. And they asked her, well, what's your boyfriend, soon to be my daughter-in-law, what does he do? And said, well, he works for a family operation. They finance carnival rides. And these two guys said, we want to meet him. And so I said, okay. And they liked niche markets. That was their niche. They used to finance Steinway pianos, Harley motorcycles, Ranger bass boats. And so they liked these odd niches. And
they had the foresight to look into it, to be open-minded about it. That's pretty cool.
And we did. I brought Larry with me in case they asked any financial questions. And after 2 hours, they gave us a very large line of credit for us.
That's great. When I was getting my MBA, and I would go, like the first day of class, the professor would go, because it was night classes at Mary, and they'd ask everybody most of the people worked at Newport News Shipbuilding, in all honesty, and then they'd be like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, "I work for a carnival," and that's all I would say. I'd be kind of funny about it, but they'd be like, "A cruise line?" I was like, "No, I work for a carnival." Like a tilt-a-whirl, it's like half the class.
They all know the tilt-a-whirl.
I couldn't get his mind around the thing. I was like, yeah. And then in the second semester, all the other kids were they knew my little funny routine there, so they would they crack up. But it was amazing how they just it blew their mind. I mean, it's the craziest thing just to be in that industry. It was crazy.
It really is. And I've had many, many discussions with customers who would go to the bank, because the bank had what they wanted, which was the deposits and, payroll, things of that nature. And they talk to the lending officer and now, where's this money coming? Well, I own a carnival. And more than once, you could see the face would change. Oh, really? Oh, and, it was that we were very fortunate when these gentlemen came into our corporate life. It was right at 2008 when, the real estate market was crashing, a little bit before that. And I remember the one banker that we dealt with who had done real estate all his life. Now that was becoming a problem, if you will, especially out west. He said, I never would have thought I wanted more amusement and less houses, but he did.
Yeah, it's an interesting and as you get to know the industry, well, we had Southern, and then was there another one in between there?
Well, Southern, yeah. What happened was Southern was part of Kansas City Southern Industries, Kansas City Southern Railroad. They were buying the Mexican Railroad at that time. It was a bidding war. They were the smallest of the big, what they call the five sisters or seven sisters. They were the smallest of the railroads. Nobody gave them a shot. And they ended up buying the Mexican Railroad. They all thought it would go to Burlington or one of those. And so they were cleaning up their balance sheet. Well, what did Southern Leasing bring to the table but debt? Whoop, time to sell. And so they sold us to Textron at that point. And Textron had it for a couple of years because, again, big financial companies. The gentleman who was in charge was collecting. Huh?
Wasn't there salesman like Jason something?
No. The gentleman who was in charge of Textron at that point was Larry Nicotra's old boss. And he had been collecting what he referred to as boutique finance companies who were dominant in their markets, and which was great, made perfect sense. Till about 9 months later, when he retired, the new chairman of the board of Textron came in and said, "What do we have all these companies for? Sell them all." So that's when I went off on my own as Prairie Financial.
Okay.
And started it just how you absolutely are not supposed to start a business. I mean, I have a degree in management and one in communications, and you're not supposed to start. You should be really funded well. I did. I said, I'll give $500 at this, and that was it. And worked out of my home, my wife and I, for 2 years with my home phone and a fax machine. And Prairie went from there. I brokered to some banks. And then ultimately, when Wade came to work for us in 2007, these two gentlemen from St. Louis became our angel investors, if you will. And then we were off. Then we could hold the paper ourselves.
The Textron thing, because I was I had a loan from Textron at one point, but it was a kid. Like, was there a salesman? I had one from you two actually for the C-Ray that we bought when we had a show. But I remember. What's that?
Mark Walker?
I could have sworn it was Jason. He's tall. No. It's like a basketball player. He was nice, great guy, really nice guy. But yeah, we bought we were just getting started. We bought what do you want to call it? Himalaya and a wheel, and it was like almost $1 million loan. And we were brand new. I was like, oh my gosh! And then, but he loaned it to us. We paid him back. And what my thought was about Textron was when they first started, they made some good loans. They loaned to some people that were good, but then because they were successful and not knowing the industry like you kind of hinted to before, like you do, they started lending to people that. I think any reasonable person that knows this industry would have said, I don't know if I'd do that.
Exactly.
And they did, and then they got killed because they got all that debt and they got taken by a couple of guys that had big loans. But this industry is I think, and you're kind of touching on it, dancing around a little bit. But if you loan to the right people, it's got to be one of the safest bets you could make. I mean, it's got to be.
It really is. I've explained to bankers, and we borrow money now from banks too. Don't get me wrong. And we explain to them, you're looking at a market that is dependent on weather. And so you have customers on the West Coast, Northeast, South. It may be raining in one spot, not another. Well, how do you know where it's raining? Well, there was a time when you'd have to maybe call somebody. Now you can just put the zip code in and you can watch it pour on on the lot if you so desire. But, you'd explain to them why, and it depended what their reaction was. You could see right away, well, it's out of my footprint. I think the biggest problem was, and you hit it, knowing who not to lend to.
Right.
And you rely on vendors. You rely on just history. Of course, history first with yourselves, but with it's a small industry. If somebody doesn't take care of their equipment, you'll know it fairly quick. You'll hear about breakdowns. You'll hear about this, that, and the other thing. We'd go out to visit The banks don't go visit people. I remember Larry telling me, don't ever wear a suit out to the thing. They'll think you're either a detective or the IRS or somebody.
Right.
Just go out. And, if you see, and back in the day of turbo lights, if you see and the lights aren't on, that's pretty easy maintenance, even for someone like myself. Or you saw
uniformed employees or something like that.
Yeah, or hydraulic fluid that we're leaking, or rust, and you could size up pretty well. If he's not taking care of turbo lights, he's probably not doing his maintenance. And so you'd visit your customers, have a corn dog, have a beer, and it didn't take a genius to figure out who, and you would just. I remember we had a bank that came to us during the sale, and they wanted to know. We found this humorous. They wanted to know, because we put in our write-ups what we thought valuation of quick sale of equipment. Most banks would want to know that. And this was a very large bank named Chase. Said, well, how do you know? Who values this? And this was when Jim Doss was still alive and stuff. And we said, well, we sit in a room and we all have opinions. And we'd say, what do you think this tilt is worth, or this kamikaze? And so we told them, this is what we put on it. Well, what made you the experts? Well, we've done a lot of these things, So we gave them the name of the vendors. We gave them the name of insurance companies and said, call them. Mm-hmm. And so the guy came back in a week and he said, we checked with all those people. Yeah. So, well, they all pointed back to Southern Leasing. Okay. So we accept your things. It's just one of those things that it takes time. I was fortunate. Larry and them were in the business for 10 years. So I came in with their knowledge. And my success has always been dependent upon other people. I'm blessed that way. I don't know why, but I'm just very, very lucky that way. And I trust people, and they seem to trust me.
Getting to know the shows or the people that, because you've been through them in good times and bad, who's solid and who's gonna stand behind it, or or at least call you and work it out if they're in trouble in some way or another. And that makes it your job a lot easier, with instead of just hiding from you or running or not taking your call or, whatever else might happen. But there's a lot of people that, I think anybody who has a foot in this industry, whether it's, like me doing marketing or something like that, you get paid by people, and you get, some people pay you like even before they do anything. They just send you the money. Yeah. And then other people, who are solid, but they're a little slow, maybe a little bit, but they're always going to pay it, the right people. And then you learn a few lessons from some people that don't pay you. And then,
the biggest thing, as you mentioned, is if they hide. We don't want the equipment back. There was probably the biggest situation there was when COVID hit. When all our customers, 100 customers plus, were all in the same boat. They couldn't work. They couldn't, what's the bank's going to want? Typically the bank said, well, we want to keep it off for 30 days or 45, go get the equipment. We talked to our bankers and, gentlemen, we probably have collateral 800, 900 piece of equipment. You don't want us to pick up 900 piece of equipment. Where would we put it? The cost to bring it back and forth. So we, Wade, my son, came up with a plan, approach to the banks to where they would be paid and our customers wouldn't have payments until COVID was over, until they started working. And I thought I was a good salesman. I thought they'll never bite. They all agreed to it. And so we didn't take back one piece of equipment. And we gave every customer 2 options, and they took it. And within the following year, when they went back, I think all but maybe 5 had made all their payments back. And that year, next year. Yeah. And the others were large ones, one more year. But it worked out. We got through COVID. And more importantly, we got our customers, took that much pressure off of them, which the loyalty of our customers has been wonderful. and it goes both ways.
Yeah, no question about it. And now you got, do you get a little nervous nowadays with sort of the buying spree that's been going on with a lot of people are buying a lot of equipment, and the equipment's not cheap anymore. I mean, it's that,
Oh, no.
not cheap, but it's like, we're saying some numbers that, like 4 years ago, you would have been like, are you nuts? I just did an interview with Chance, and they were really one of the first ones to have higher prices. And a lot of people, stopped buying and they stopped selling, but now they're looking at coming back in because they're kind of in the middle of what the prices are again, with the expenses. So it's, I just wonder if you get a little nervous about, because, times have been pretty good and people are buying, and it's almost like there's a rush to buy because, there's a wait for so long at some of these places to get equipment and everything else. You got to put deposits out and everything else. But it's just, is the merry-go-round going to stop sort of, or, and will he be holding the bag, or are most people conservative and they,
No, you're exactly right. It is something that we talk about. However, that good customer that 10, 15 years ago was maybe buying a $500,000 piece, and you go, wow, how is he ever going to pay for that sucker?
Right.
And now it's maybe $1.5 million.
Right.
And of course, back then it wouldn't have mattered. We couldn't do any $1 million deals. Now we can, but it's a case that it does concern us. The other thing that concerns us is it's so far out. It's they want a deposit now of so much,
right?
And they want more in 6 months from now, 6 more months, right on down the line. They're not going to see this piece of equipment till maybe 2028.
Right.
And some are. I have a couple that are out 2029. And
I was joking with one of the manufacturers at IAPA. I was like, if I bought a ride from you, I would have to take out a life insurance policy on you. By the time it's like, 6 years down the road, it's a long ways. It's like, who knows what's going to happen.
It really is. And you look at the average age of, let's say, show owners. And then you add a 5 or 7 year loan on top of that. You might be looking at 13 years before he gets the piece, or 10 years, 12 years, gets the piece and pays it off. And
I guess the one good thing is that they're using today's money to finance the ride 5 years down the line. You're ahead by the time, if it gets delivered and the guy goes broke, at least it's like half paid for already. So you're in pretty good shape. So
but I just had a gentleman call me earlier this morning with the tariffs. His ride is about ready. A week ago, it was 50% or 40%, something like that. Now he's dropped it to 10. Said, well, on $1 million ride, that's in $100,000.
Yeah.
And so that changes your ratios. We've worked that out with the banks, but who's paying that? We know who's paying it. And and a lot of the big rides, the expensive ones, are coming from Europe. So you have that.
It's a little harder to affect any kind of.
But I did read the thing with Chance, and I think that's good. That I think that I don't know, they didn't mention anything new, but people need the other ones.
Yeah, they want to say whatever. It's a good thing. The other thing that I wonder about that people don't talk about with being so far out is and we've seen it happen so much is the price of whatever, steel, electronic. Yeah. What happens if there's a giant spike in something, or there's God forbid, a war or something goes on where you can't get something, that's essential. Yeah, essential component. What do they do? They can't raise the price now that they've got a contract, and if it goes up substantially and the ride costs them whatever, double what they thought it was going to cost, that's a big problem.
Right. And these other countries, we tend to think parochially, just us, but some of these other countries, they can sell that same piece to somebody in the far Near East or Far West. They can move that piece. It's desirable to other countries other than us. And, so it's out there. That's something. And then you worry about what's the dollar going to, and I don't do this. We have to figure what are we doing on hedging? Do we hedge the dollar? Do we not? Because right now the dollar is moving in the wrong direction and we have tariffs. And so they start adding that up. And so, yeah, it's a concern. It really is. And it's something we're going to have to handle. Both, again, what's in the best interest of our customers is in our best interest. So we're tied directly to that. We deal in
you didn't have to think about for years. The financing is pretty straightforward. You call up chance or wisdom or somebody, and you get the ride within a year, and both ends of the transaction, and you could talk to Dick Chance or somebody, and
Sure.
find out if there's a problem or whatever was going on, and it becomes, as it becomes worldwide, it becomes a little bit more, as the finance becomes more complicated, as the tariffs and all the other things become more complicated. It's a little bit more. It's a different kind of business.
And then it becomes again. Then you go back and you say, okay, you're borrowing money, but how long? What's the source of the money coming from? Granted, I think most of our guys think we just have a little thing and print it. Not the case. We have to go to the people we're getting the money from.
Yeah.
What are there? And the banks are changing. It seems this one's being bought by this one, and then you're starting back over again, explaining what your business is. Fortunately, we have a 30-plus year track record, and now O.A., because Ryan has invested in O.A., took the angel investors out, Haas is, I guess, 70-plus years. So the banks here look at us in a very positive light, and the market, while it's large to us, for some of these large banks, it's not very large. And that's when some of them dropped out of it. Plus, they look for things that they can package and sell to the Chinese or whatever, package so many titles of cars and we'll make a half a point on it and move it off. The paper stays with us. And so we're tied right with it that way. So it makes a little difference for us.
And you got to be super proud to have Wade with you in the business. And
yeah,
doing all
he God bless him. He had his both his bachelor's and his master's in finance. I did not, and they would refer to me, Larry, as a hunter gatherer. I'm much better at putting the deal together. What does the customer need? How can we get it done? It's maybe a little weak here. How can we strengthen it ahead of time, knowing full well that somebody's going to ask this question. So you answer it for them in your write-up and you eliminate the question, And so that's maybe my strength. Wade's strength is there. And the person who runs our back office now is Tracy Galvin, who is the ex-credit manager at Southern. She worked away from the industry for 30 years, and then we got her to come back. So she took over my wife's position, but it's still only 4 people in the office. So you're not going to, you get the recording, it's because somebody's on the phone. You'll get an answer eventually.
Right.
Yeah.
You still have relationships or you still have to have relationships with manufacturers. You still have to have relationships, God forbid, with brokers, maybe to sell something if worse came to worse, or at least they have the facility to do it. And
and you mentioned relationships, and that is tremendously important. When I started out on my own in 2000 with Prairie, with my whole $500, it was a case that it was because of relationships I had developed with customers. In the case of customers, we had a number of customers who came on board, but the first one was Butch Butler. Butch saw the need not to lose financing sources. He saw that it was, we had done business with them. What can I do to support him? Jerry Wisdom was the same way. Jerry called, that was the second deal I ever did alone. And it wasn't Carnival. It was for Jerry for his equipment, for his operation.
Okay.
Some painting thing. I don't know what it was, but I knew Jerry, so I was comfortable with it. And Butch was equipment. And then phone calls came from Len Solid and Nancy Buckley at Rides for You. very supportive, and Jeff and Holly, very supportive. And so we heard from brokers, we heard from manufacturers, and they were very kind and supportive of us getting started. And again, due to relationships and customers, long-term relationships came into play. And so you keep them over the years and you develop them. And that's because other than that, all we have is a dead president on a piece of paper. It's the ultimate commodity. It's the same at every place they go. Same picture on the paper. So what can you do to help them get their goals? And if you help enough people help what they need, you'll do just fine. You don't worry about it. Just do the deal and it'll take care of itself. And it has.
That's pretty neat. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
You've come such a long way with it. But yeah, Butch Butler's had such a big impact on so many different businesses. Pete Downs was telling me that I guess it was the company before he bought it, that Dale Merriam and I think it was Butch Butler like drove through town in a car and needed to repair a canvas top, and they had it like in their car. They were personally driving, and they stopped off, before he bought the company and said, "Hey, can you fix this?" And it was a canvas company. He's like, "Yeah, I guess so. Why not?" So they sewed it, and then they've had a relationship with the amusement industry ever since. So it's pretty neat.
Well, a number of years ago, probably 10, 11 years ago, Peter Thurnes would come over when he was the sales manager at KMG. And he and Len, Wade, and I would go out with the wives, and we called it the Magical Mystery Tour because you never knew what was going to happen. And we had T-shirts made up and had some fun with it. But we pick a section of the country, and we just go visit customers. Now, in some cases, Lenny wanted to talk to parks. We were doing parks. Or Peter wanted to talk about, it was maybe a moderate-sized show. Well, they weren't going to buy a big $1 million piece. So, but we all went around and you got a chance to just visit for different reasons. But it also was, again, going back to that relationship, cemented some relationships with the families, because we're still a family-owned operation, as most of carnivals are too, that way. And so you do things like that help along the way.
Yeah, and you never you think that like these food guys nowadays, you're talking about pricing, like it's unbelievable. I mean, so you're financing a $300, $400, I even saw $500,000 food trailer now. I mean, you're laughing because you never would have thought it. And not 5
No, I'm
years.
not laughing at it. We're financing.
I mean, you're chuckling about it because it's like I remember when Gary Otterbacher, broke like 200,000. It was like the end of the world book with one of his trailers. It was like, oh my gosh, $200,000. That's how can you ever pay for it? Like you're saying, but now you're talking over double. It's incredible.
Well, I remember going to Gibtown and speaking with one of then a lot of food companies were down there, and he said, "Boy, we've got to sell this thing, Paul, and we've got before we leave Gibtown." Well, we may be out of business. It was $100,000 trailer, and they did. We financed it, and then the next year it was 150. The next year it was 200,000, and now you're right. Now they're up to 500,000 in some cases.
We did an ad with Gary. It was kind of tongue in cheek, but it was the headline was "Too Expensive" with a question mark, and had his top of the line trailers, and because that was the knock where people were saying it's too expensive at that price, but then he listed all the things that made it special and why you could afford it and why it was worth it, why it was a good buy to do it. But it's funny how things change like that. It's just we were talking before about the ride pricing and stuff like that, because after COVID, I was teasing one of the manufacturers. I said, you should have like a steel is going crazy. I said, you should have like a board behind you that, has like the stock market, like the current price of steel, like Can I buy that ride? Yes. Well, it depends on when you sign the paper. I'm going to hit the button and I'll tell you how much it is.
Yeah, it was spot pricing. And even in us, we have a big board where we put down, here's the day that it was ordered. Okay, it's $1 million ride, or it's, we do a lot of $200,000 rides and $100,000. But, when does the money go out? Well, so much goes now. But on some of these big ones, it used to be it was a pretty narrow thing. Now we had to get a bigger board because it goes out years. And, but that's part of the business, and knowing the business and who's buying that equipment, because we'll probably see it move down to the next tier, to the secondary market at, whenever, 10 years, 15 years. And, they'll get something else that's new.
And that you're dealing probably with a lot of sons and daughters of people you were dealing with when you first got started, right? And by and large, though, the businesses translate pretty well. I mean, it would be like Wade is interested in business and finance, and I have an MBA. I'm always interested in stuff like that, like how unique our business is. But I would venture to say that the success rate, passing it down a generation or two or three, is astronomically high. I mean, really, when you think about the people that are working in the industry, I think of the Vivonas or Brightoffers or there's so many of them out there that just are doing a great Deglers that are, multiple generations doing as good or maybe even better in some cases, jobs that their parents did in a certain way. It's pretty amazing that they. Well,
and when I quote retired 3 years ago, although semi-retired, I still get phone calls. I did this morning, but I just refer them out. They're running the business. It's their time, and I'm here if they need me. But the Mark and Wade, they're doing it and doing a great job. But it's a case that there's also the people that I knew are of an age like me. And so this is the next generation that's in the 40s and 50s that Wade and Mark relate to. And now they're even some younger. And so you're doing transactions for maybe a son or a daughter. She's buying this food trailer and she's starting out. Well, it's so much easier. You have the track record with them. And if the parents were good, the kids tend to be good because they learn from.
I've talked to him. It's a lot like his dad. When if you close your eyes, you're thinking of his dad. So
who's this now?
Blake Houston.
Oh yeah, very much so.
Yeah, he's very impressive to talk to. I don't know how old he is, but he's young. I mean, he's very young.
Oh yeah, he's probably younger than Wade, I think. But just like that, now Wade he sits on the SLA board and O.A. board. Well, that's fine. The great connections there, but it's also a way for him to give back to the industry.
Yeah.
Just like that would not been my expertise. I give back to the industry that's been very good to my family the other way. And that just fell out of nowhere, when Father John passed away. But, that was the impetus for it. And people said, well, why would you do this? Well, because this industry put my son and my daughter through college, and gave myself and my wife a very nice living. And so you belong to the industry, although not born into the industry, not at all. But so it's a little different, but you're able to give back to the industry that you learn to love.
Yeah, that's that. I was just going to touch. It's not Halloween or not anything else, but you're wearing a clerical collar and suit there because of the work that you do as a deacon. You're a deacon in the Catholic Church, and there are, I think it was like 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, they kind of split it up the chaplaincy, I guess, for the carnival industry, right? They have different denominations.
Right. When Father John passed away, and we're representative of the Catholic Church, but when Father John passed away, I received a call, from the Showman's League in case for Caney Also, Bob Johnson called and said, would you be the chaplain? Some people knew that I was a deacon. It wasn't one that I ever advertised in terms of the industry, but some guys found out.
When I read it, someone was like, really?
Oh, yeah. Well, I remember when Ed Murphy passed away, Father John did the mass, but he said, Paul, you knew Ed very well, and Ed was a great supporter of us. And I said, I'd be honored to, serve. And when I walked into the thing, some of the guys, it was the first time they saw me in the collar.
Yeah.
And the thing was, oh, are you a priest? No, I'm married. I'm not a priest. I'm a deacon. And And so from things like that, it went out. So when they asked, I said to them, well, I'd be honored. However, Catholic Church doesn't necessarily work that way. You can't freelance. You're going to have to talk to the USCCB, United States Council of Catholic Bishops. They have a department called the Pastoral Care of Migrants, Refugees, and Travelers. And they supply priests and religious to those groups. And this is the division that would take care of everything from Irish travelers to gypsies to race car drivers to, in this case, carnivals, parks, ships. All these fall under there because they're traveling around and they're not necessarily going to that same church every week. And that's where Father John was under that auspices. And so I said, you'll have to go check with them. I found out who it was. They said, yeah, we don't have a priest available to do it. You know the industry? Well, yeah. Okay. Bingo. You're it. So, it's one of those things that I'm the Catholic representative. However, learning from Father John, you're the chaplain for the industry. Many of my customers are not Catholic, other Christian faiths, Jewish, whatever. They're running into a problem. They need somebody to talk to, somebody who understands the business and who understands the pressures of the business. And so it's now in the case of, we wear gray. And as I said, I'll wear it if I'm doing something at Gibtown, like not last year, the year before. Ash Wednesday was the Wednesday at Gibtown. So I brought ashes. I was at our booth with the collar. People realized who, what, when. And so I don't know, I must have put ashes on 40, 45 people, whether they be Catholic or not. And that's not my decision to decide. And so you do, Rick Haney, we try to use Father John's stole, okay? But a priest wears the stole straight around the neck. A deacon wears it over one shoulder and tied at the thing. So we had a stole made with my stole. Rick had it done, God bless him. We did it for this. We used our logo with taking off O.A. That would have been a little bit wrong. Then for the Protestants, we just had the cross. Then again, we had a customer whose logo was the merry-go-round, so we used that. A number of my customers are Jewish, so we had the Star of David put on, another star, and then Jeff Hawley, not Jeff Hawley, that's broken. Jeff and Holly digitized that so that I have a stole that's just for this industry. And it's a case that, I'll do the installations, the Christmas parties, I get through all the fun stuff, but I also do the funerals, baptisms. The baptisms are great. The funerals, I've done 3 or 4 funerals of guys, and you just call up in this case, they happen to be Catholic funerals. You call the priest and say, do you know, and Richard Tinsley was one, and he had just been transferred into this parish. He said, I don't have a clue who this guy is. But the mass is next week. I said, I identified myself as the chaplain for carnivals. And generally the priest will go, we have a chaplain for carnivals? I haven't had one that hasn't said that. In fact, my own bishop, who had to sign off, said, "We have a chaplain for Carl?" "Yes, Bishop, we do."
What diocese are you incarnated in?
I'm in Kansas City, St. Joseph.
Kansas City. Okay.
Yeah, Kansas City, St. Joseph. There's another diocese on the Kansas side, Kansas City, Kansas, but we're in the Missouri side. But so when you identify and say, "Yes, I know him, I know of him," or "He's one of my customers," they will always say, "Oh yeah, you come in and you do that. I'll just do the mass. You do all that part." So the biggest thing, most rewarding, probably I'd have to say, is like during COVID. No one knew what was going to happen. You know that, Ron. You probably were trying to talk to people, and it was all over this planet.
Yeah.
And I'd get calls. They could talk to me because they knew that, one, I would just stay with me, but number two, that I understood the pressures, maybe not personally, but knowing that some of their longtime employees have to move their trailers into the winter quarters and stay as long as they can. They have nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
They can't afford to traipse down to Florida with it or whatever. And so they just call, and they weren't, you could tell very quickly, they weren't saying, "Look, I'm going to repair this ride. I need some." No, they just started talking. I'd close the door, and they'd talk maybe 15, 20 minutes. Just, they knew they couldn't talk to, as much as they'd want to talk to one of their friends, a competitor, maybe. But like Gibtown, you go in the bar, everybody's doing great. They all hate the same people, blah, blah, blah. But they can't show any weakness. And so it was very hard on them. I had a couple of times the wives called me and said, "Paul, call this guy. He's sitting watching soap operas. It's not good. He's drinking. It's not good. He's bored."
Yeah, well, even psychologically, just not even the pressures of business, but just the change in lifestyle, not being on the road for the first time in, 20, 30, 40 years, it was a big thing for some people. Some people adapted great, but some people had a hard time, like you're saying.
No, and right now we came through, I had a couple of phone calls from people who retired into business just the last month or two, because they're retired now. They've been in the business their whole life.
Right.
And now they're not going out. It's like a farmer who's not going to plant. He's still on the farm, but somebody else doing the planting. And it goes through their mind, "Oh, that was a good year, bad year." And I missed that. And they'd go back at minimum wage if they could. They can't, And I mentioned to a couple of show owners, if you have somebody like that, call them. "Hey, I'm going to be in such and such city nearby. Why don't you come down? We'll have dinner. We'll just come down, sit and talk to some of the guys." It would mean the world to them. I mean, bottles of pills wouldn't do near as health as just a phone call. Say, "We're coming into town. Why don't you come out to the show?" And that would be something they could do to people that gave their whole lives to the industry. Doesn't cost a dime, And so I've been encouraging people to do that.
Well, with your chaplaincy, that when you're appointed, and for those that aren't Catholic, they may not realize, but there's certain things that deacon can do or a priest can do that a deacon can't do. Was that like your confessions or say mass for that matters? But you can baptize, and you can
marriages, baptize, funerals. Yeah, there's only three things I can't do that a priest can do. One, as you said, is hear confessions. Probably because I would try to in the confession, like, "Oh, that's nothing. Let me tell you what I did." It wouldn't work out. I don't think. Plus they'd all get one Hail Mary. I'd be way too easy. But it's a case I can't do that. And while I deal with people as they're dying a lot.
Yeah, last rites, can't you?
Well, I can do the last, technically what they call last rite. I can't anoint the sick.
Right.
Because anointing is part of the anointing process is forgiveness and absolution. I've been with people that have said they see the collar and first thing, "Oh, I hear confession." "I can't hear your confession." "Oh, okay." And then they go on and get me the thing. And you just go, la, 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 la. And they'll say a prayer, but they may be very close to death and we'll call a priest, but he's not going to make it in time. So but that's not any absolution. And the third thing is the consecration, bread and wine. I can't do that. Other than that, I do basically but our role is different. We are ordained ministers, but ours is a servant ministry. Yeah. And so I do, if the priest isn't there, I've had twice, they have a thing called SCAP, Sunday celebration in the absence of a priest. The priest both of them got sick and the mass was happening. Well, the church allows for me to go in and I do everything up to the offertory, then bring it back at the Our Father. And that counts.
Can you get consecrated host for that or no?
Can I what?
Can't you get pre-consecrated host for that?
Yeah, no, I can. If they're pre-consecrated, they would be in the tabernacle. Like if it was a Sunday, you might have one from Saturday night. I can do that. Right. If not, they have what they call a spiritual communion. I would do that, and sure. It's a prayer that you do that because of circumstances. We don't have any consecrated hosts.
But was Father John saying a lot of masses and hearing a lot of confessions? Is that a, I don't want to say a void, but is that a place where you kind of have to fill in the gap a little bit? Maybe
you do. He would go out and he would offer to do a mass, whether, he did, Sunday morning, but he had his own responsibilities back at his parish, as right. I had my responsibilities here at my parish. So I don't know.
Watertown, was that right? Watertown.
He was.
I'm thinking of that was before him.
Yeah, no, he was up in northwestern Iowa.
Iowa, okay.
Yeah. Father Mac was up in Watertown, New York.
That's what it was.
Yeah, and then he became Monsignor. And I'm based here in just a suburb of Kansas City, Lee Summit. But I can do what they call communion service if I have consecrated.
Right.
You do that. But those are the only three things I can't do. So like in Phoenix this year, we did the memorial there. I did a memorial at St. Louis Showman's, and now the Midwest Showman's have asked me to be their chaplain. So I'll start doing things up there. But there's a limit to how many places I can go, obviously.
Yeah, but there's a little bit more work as far as, you have to call in helpers, I guess, for lack of, you have to call it a priest sometimes, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, most definitely. And if
a priest can do everything, you have to have a network a little bit, or at least have the resources to be able to call someone or figure something out if you need.
Oh, yeah. If somebody said I need to have a confession, that's fine. Mm-hmm. I would call a local guy, identify myself, and they would probably send a priest out or have him come in. They do that. I don't know. Father John probably heard some confessions out in Vegas. I don't know why I picked Vegas, but he might have heard one or two out there, over a cup of coffee. It doesn't have to be it just has to be two men talking, that type of thing.
Absolutely.
So,
well, and the other thing I used to always think was beautiful that there used to be pictures of, and I don't know if they do anymore, was Straits used to have a Greek Orthodox priest come out and bless the train before they left here. And I think that was probably, standard practice in the industry for train shows back in the day, I'm sure.
Well, it's still, I go out and bless equipment. I'll do that.
Okay.
Oh yeah. When I go visit somebody, I take some water with me, or I just get some water, I bless it and do that. Yeah, I'll bless equipment. That way I've done that really wherever I go. I offer it and people are happy to have it. The people, I try to do it off hours, because if you go walking to the middle of the thing and you're blessing equipment, people tend not to get on that ride. I don't know why. And if you're doing a food trailer, they'll go right to the next trailer. We got to get to this one before he blesses it. There must be something. They get a little worried, but it's all good. It really is.
That's neat. So you have, and how, I don't want to say religious, because but is there a pretty high level of religiosity in some ways in the carnival business?
It seems very much. There's
quite a few. Even people that aren't, especially like Catholics. Like I used to say it. I was actually a religion major in undergraduate, mm-hmm. and I used to do a thing about one of the things I did about was being culturally Jewish, where the people weren't necessarily practicing Jews, but they identified as Jews and did some things that were, would be Jewish. And I think there's a big component of that with Catholics too, where they definitely identify as Catholics. They may not go to mass every Sunday or they might be Christmas and Easter type Catholics or something like that, but they
Chris Easter is what we call them.
Yeah.
No, but I'd say generally this industry is very faith-filled. You have, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the other chaplains that the Showman's League have, I think there's 2 Baptist ministers, 1 Assemblies of God, and they have, well, I take care of this end, but there's also a deacon in Chicago who can fill in. He takes care of, his niche is, he's a Hispanic deacon. He tripped over the guys who were cleaning up the muckers on the racetracks at Arlington Park. And so as the races come through, he takes care of the worker bees out there. And there is a priest, there are 2 priests take care of the circus people. Yeah. Then there's a gentleman, a deacon in Milwaukee. He, of all things, takes care of the wrestlers. He tried that for 1 year, got his head beat up, I guess, and said, "I'm going to go on the other side." And so, but this is as an industry, and I talk to a lot of people of different faiths, and that's fine.
Yeah, I see it too. I see it, and things you talk to people in a business sense, and then you get to talk to them personally about things, or they might see something you're doing, or I might mention something, or about going to mass on Sunday or something, and then it comes out. But there's and it's, when you are traveling today, you got to say it's a lot easier to find a church, especially if you're Catholic. Mass time, because there's apps you can use, even confessions. When you're traveling, there's really no excuse because you can download that and have whatever you want. But in the couple minutes we have left, I was curious to ask you about. Are you excited about having an American Pope with Pope Leo? And
I really am. I was like everybody else, surprised. And,
I was shocked.
I was too. I did think there was a chance for a American Pope, but it was going to be Archbishop Cardinal Tobin out of.
You really thought Tobin from Indiana but now in
Newark, because he was in Rome in charge of all the other. He was happened to be Redemptorist, but all the other Jesuits and things. That was his. So he knew all these people from years of seeing all the heads who now are cardinals too, and he was. It's a story too long for here. Now, I've had the honor of serving with him twice. He was a friend of my roommate from college. And when his parents died, he came back and did both their funerals. But he's more than qualified. And I really thought that was the one that if they were going to pick him, it was going to be him. But so it is neat to do that. But he's really, what's nice is he is, instead of being an American Pope, he has that experience of missionary poverty, seeing people,
And he's a theologian. I think he's got the STD. I think not the bad STD. He's got a doctorate of sacred literature, theology degree, and quite a few things. And the thing that amazes me is, for people that aren't Catholic, they come from all different sides of the tent, I guess you'd say. He seems to get along with everyone, well. The traditionalists were happy. I mean, Cardinal Burke praised him and was very happy with what he did. That's big. I mean, because he brings wheels a lot of power and influence in that segment. And then in people that were, devotees of Francis and probably more on the left side, as you call it. I mean, it's hard to talk about religion in that way, but
that's a reality in today's thing. And I think what was good in the case of this choice was you keep thinking a house divided cannot stand.
Oh, yeah.
And sadly, as a church, we're very mirroring the political situation. And it used to be a separation of church and state was great. And now all of a sudden it's the same way. And that's an issue, I think. And that's what he's trying to
Yeah, and it was becoming
address.
bigger. There were a lot of factions that people were getting upset about different things. But I think this guy seems to have an uncanny ability to really bring people together, because everybody prays and you don't see that very often. So,
no, and there'll be some people that
briefly, I mean, they don't like go out and say he's a jerk or something like that. You know, they'll say
but
speech in some way, and you understand what they're saying. But yeah,
it does happen, and I know it's probably going to happen, going to continue in some way, shape, or form. I see it in my own parish, and I have to be very careful, as I am with the amusement part of my life, to steer clear of one side or the other, because I have customers on both sides. I have parishioners that are on both sides. I mean, you can poke the bear a little bit to maybe make him think and maybe think a little bit past their thing. But you try to bring up some things that maybe the softer parts, where you can move a little movement. And if I can do that, it's all good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I really appreciate your time and your work for the industry and all you've done over the years, and especially for coming on and speaking about it. I think I wanted to cover the chaplaincy because I think that's something that's never talked about, and it's great work that you do, and people. It's good for people to know that it's out there for them, whether they're Catholic or any other religion.
No, and just like one thing that's very similar to the amusement, we would get a lot of customers on referral. Hey, who are you doing business with? Somebody pissed them off, and I've had luck, or we like these people, and we get a referral. The same things. I'll get people who something's in their head and they're having some trouble, and they've talked to either the owner or another person and said, well, what do you do when you're all, well, I call this guy. Well, I don't know him. Just call the number. He'll take care of it. He knows the industry. I mean, if I tell him it's a kamikaze, a yo-yo, he's not going to go crazy. No. That's one of the things with banks. They're worried that if they have it take something back and they say, well, what's the piece during the meeting? Well, we have a kamikaze, a yo-yo, a sicko, a tilt. And they go, what? And they're afraid of the names. They'll take back a truck that's a cesspool truck. That doesn't matter. They understand that. So anyway, Ron, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate what you do.
And we look forward to seeing you at the next trade show or somewhere out there.
Oh yeah, I'll be at. I asked Wade, and I said, where do you want me to go? He said, I want you at all the trade shows. I said, really? I said, yep. Okay. So here we go. All right. Thank you, Ron.
Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.
And we appreciate all the happiness that our people bring at a time that we need some happiness. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This podcast is brought to you by Innovative Ticketing is the ticketing source made for the amusement industry. Our staff of professionals can guide you through your setup, assist with customer service, even on the weekends when you most need it, and help increase your sales through promotions that work. Innovative Ticketing is the ticketing source made for the amusement industry. Sign up today at innovativeticketing.com.